It's lights out on the pit wall. Welcome to our Fantasy Formula One podcast. I'm Jeanmark, and joining me this evening is my bro Dominick and my father, Dr. David Kessler. This is an unusual evening because I've got a business trip these next 2 days, so we're recording it a date earlier. Let's start it off with a big thank you. We had 69 subscribers last week at the podcast, and now we've got 106. That is a huge growth. Thank you to everyone who's joined the pit crew, joining us on the pit wall. Let's start off with our race results. We can see that Hamilton and Verstappen get to their customary finishing positions, scoring roughly 40 points apiece. What are your guys' reactions as it pertains to the big scores and the big losers from this race?
Quite a bit of interesting stuff going on here. One of the big lookers for this race was Alpine, Ocon and Alonso, both scoring almost 20 points each. That was pretty big. As you see, Alonso did really well. Ocon did go down by a place, not enough to really do too much damage to his fantasy points. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I was updating the Google Sheets as it was getting closer. And after third practice, everybody was trying to pick up Ocon because they saw that he had some great potential. Look at that. He qualified 6th. He got decent points, 18, but Alonso with the big storm drive gaining 5 places, and he ended up with 17 points. So hats off to anybody who had those 2 drivers on their team. On the flip side, those hot Ferrari boys seem to not have done as well as you would hope. Well, Leclerc got his 22 points, but Sainz. He qualified 5th and tumbled down the order. What are your thoughts about his poor performance, Dad?
Sainz only scoring 2 points was kind of disappointing to me because he had scored around 20 before.
Did you have him on your team?
Yes, I've had him on one of my teams.
Oh, man.
Oof. I picked him up for this last race because I was trying to increase my value, and he laid an egg.
That's a big oof.
Oof. I picked him up to increase the value of my team, but I bet you he's going to lose a bunch of value over this next race, so I might switch him out real quick.
Double big oof.
Oof. So those are our fantasy report. As you can see, you really want to get in the top 10. If you're not getting in the top 10, you're not getting the double-digit points. Let's kick it over to our dynamic pricing report. Here's our dynamic pricing, which is very, very interesting. We have the little red chevrons that show what they would have had last race, and then they lost their streak this race. We had Ricciardo, Sainz, Stroll, Ferrari, McLaren, all losing some of their streaks. 2 teams, though, that did get a streak bonus, which was Mercedes. They got their 5 points for a qualifying bonus, and McLaren got their 10 points for their race bonus. But another major thing is the story of Ocon. I put in my 3 statistical secrets before last race. It took 4 long days when he was negative 90s before he dropped by 0.1%. That meant that over the course of the season, he had dropped by 500,000. Right after the third practice, zoom, everybody wanted him. He got 0.2 million up. Right after the race and him doing really good, he went 0.2 million up. Even though it looks like he's raising in price from the beginning of the season, he is still behind by 0.1. What are your guys' reactions to the dynamic pricing and the value of some of these drivers?
Ocon was going up in value, even though he has less of a qualifying streak than Gasly. He's scoring more points than Gasly.
And that's probably why so many people want him. Ocon, he's slipping in there very quietly. He's got 42 points. Gasly's got 29. The vast majority of the league seems to be infatuated with the AlphaTauri drivers. Gasly 42% owned, Tsunoda 31% owned, but Ocon, he's got 17%. Alonso's got 10. But if Alpine starts performing or improving like they were at the end of last season, I could see these drivers start going through the roof.
The 0.4 going up for Ocon might not be quite as surprising as you would think, because only 17% of people own him, as opposed to Gasly, who's at 42%. So chances are people are starting to buy him, and his value is going up because not very many people had him to begin with.
So you're saying that since there's an influx of trade-ins, that's why his value is starting to shoot up.
Right. So more people want him, but obviously if a lot of people already own them, there can't be a lot more people that want him.
Looking forward, it seems that picking up drivers because of a race streak, how many people can lose their streaks? 2 constructors, 3 drivers. I think these race streaks are a lot harder to come by than we might think.
Considering that McLaren has received their race streak, they're going back down to 0. So that might be a consideration when people consider that they're constructors.
But it seems like if you pick up McLaren with the drivers you're getting, how are you going to afford anybody else? Like Ferrari is is pulling away in their value.
I'm surprised because I don't think their drivers are doing extremely well.
Okay, well, since you brought that up, let's look at the Infographics tab of the Google Sheet.
Like, there's a hot take for you.
There's a hot take for you.
There's a hot take for you.
There's a hot take for you. Let's zoom right in.
I sure hope you've got some kind of facts to back them words.
Well, look at this. We've got our top drivers. This is Hamilton 128. Verstappen's 116. So he's still 12 points behind Hamilton. But he is so much cheaper than Hamilton, which is probably why many people are using Verstappen. But going down to that constructor question, Ferrari is only given 91 points. That is showing what Dad said. They are underperforming compared to McLaren, who is just 0.2 million cheaper.
All right, well, I'll let that one slide this time.
Well, thank you.
Yep. On this Google spreadsheet, you go to the Infographics tab and you can look at some very interesting data stats. And so it's great to help our conversation and also for you picking your team. Let's get our race reaction now by starting off with a tweet. Thank you to those of you that have been following us on Twitter. We asked, what are your race reactions? And Carter Cotton said, unfortunate that Max lost fastest lap to track limits. Bottas shows once again that he struggles to contend with Hamilton and Max. As much as the commentary was trying to say today during the race, Bottas, he just has to get that first win and he'll get that oomph. I'm like, no, just because you get a win doesn't mean anything. Like, you have to get in Hamilton's head. He's in the lead. He's always been the lead. He gets up in front. He manages his tires. Bottas is not going to be able to contend with Hamilton because the car is ultimately built to Hamilton's driving style. Feel sorry for Bottas, but Hamilton's going to win half the races each season. And Bottas is probably going to win max of 2.
Well, Bottas is still the best wingman out there.
True, and spoiler alert, we've got a new segment in our podcast, and you're going to find out that Bottas is actually a fantasy pick sleeper. Let's talk about the race. How do you guys feel about the battle, quote unquote, between Verstappen and the two Mercedes?
I'm going to say it was a little underwhelming. We had such a great start for Verstappen. Of course, you're always excited for that. What will he do? Will he drive really well? And he did. He drove as well as he could. It seemed like there might have been some issues with the vehicle, but you could just see while they were racing, the Mercedes just took off. And Verstappen, just as soon as Hamilton got past, that was it. That was as far as it got for them. And that's unfortunate. Some tracks are better suited for the Red Bull and some tracks are better suited for Mercedes. And today it just looked like it was for Mercedes.
We also have to keep in mind that Mercedes, after the first race in Bahrain, had 3 weeks just to work on that car. The Mercedes is really improving. They're getting the rear stability better. And, well, I knew as soon as Hamilton won the first race, Verstappen was probably not going to win the championship. He wins half the races. So if you're not winning more races than him, you're not going to beat him because he usually finishes second. If you're the winner, he's finishing second. If he's the winner, you're probably not finishing second. It's like this vicious cycle of him having the best car, him being the best driver in that car, and just leaving Bottas to eat dust and Verstappen to chase fastest laps.
I thought it was interesting that Hamilton has won the last 4 races that he started in second position. That caught me by surprise. And I also was pretty impressed with his taking advantage of the slightest errors and passing the drivers when they make a slight error. He was pretty impressive, I thought.
Speaking of passing and the aggression required, Perez did not think Norris passed him correctly. It seemed like the track limits thing was not being consistent at all this entire season. In this race, we have that. Verstappen loses pole position because of track limits. He loses fastest lap because of track limits. Then Perez sees Norris fly off the track while passing him. That's not dealt anything with.
The thing that confused me the most was they had said that Perez had called in and said, I don't think that he passed me while on track. They were going to take that to the stewards and have them take a look at it. And then nothing came from it. Just sat there and I was like, okay, so what's going to happen with that? Sometimes nothing comes from it. By the time anything could have actually realistically have happened, Perez got the place back. Anything going on, they're just like, okay, fine, he got the place back. We'll just let it slide.
It takes a while for them to review those things. And by the time they would be able to review it, he'd already taken his place back. It's a moot
I
point.
disagree. They reviewed Max Verstappen losing track limits in like a half a lap. He got the fastest lap the last lap of the race, and he was pulling in. He thought he had it. He had team radio. He gets out, and Martin Brundle is like, oh, Bottas got fastest lap. He's like, what? Where was that with Perez? They seem to be monitoring like a hawk those track limits. And then, like you said, sometimes it's like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah, but it all goes back to the idea of advantage. Like, I understand we could say that all 4 tires going off the track, that gave him an advantage, obviously. But going back to Verstappen, why am I the one that gets penalized for this? This is the fastest lap, okay? This is a point for the championship. If there has ever been a time where something could give a driver an advantage, it is something that could possibly give a driver an entire point for the rest of the season. So I do understand that in the grand scheme of things, that is a little bit more important.
It's now time for our heroes and zeros. Leading off, bro, who was your hero and zero?
It seems like in the last couple of videos, I've been the first to kind of jump on the making fun of Haas, but today I'd like to do a little bit of a flip. I'm going to give Schumacher a little bit of props. He got his first pass of the season, and I know that Latifi was having some issues, so he was not driving not exactly as fast as he could have, that Schumacher was able to be consistent and to get it done. He got that first pass. I'm sure it felt great. So hats off to you, Schumacher, for that.
So Schumacher was really trying to pass Latifi before the Red Bull and Mercedes pit stops came through, and then they started going through the back markers. It was crazy because he tried to outbrake Latifi and immediately not being able to do it, got blue flagged, got a huge gap that he had to overcome. For him to be able to pull it back, eventually get that pass, make it clean, no contact, hats off to him, because it was looking like they're not going to get much more than what they're getting this race.
For my zero of the day, it's not Sainz. I understand that his race was a little bit disappointing. I'm picking Sainz, but not necessarily Sainz. Whoever decided to give him mediums instead of softs, they're the zero of the week for me. You could literally see how much of an effect that had. He went from being quite far up on the grid, and just as the tires started to wear out, just getting a little bit slower, a little bit slower, a little bit slower, and then ending up falling out. That's not really Sainz's fault. I think he did the best he could. That was just an unfortunate decision on the team's part.
Everyone went longer, and this guy was the first to pit. Dad, who is your hero and zero?
First, I was thinking Ocon would be my hero, but reflecting on it, I think Alonso would be my hero. He qualified in 13th place and joined his compadre up there on 8th place, and it was neat to see 2 Alpine in the top 10.
I guess since I took my hero, Alonso, I'll switch places and I'll take Ocon. I think it was a very solid qualifying, but also to keep it, because midway through the race, it did not look like he was going to keep that position. But he was able to get the management of his tires and climb back in, keep him alive, and that was a solid drive by Ocon.
All right, Dad. Now, who's your zero of the week?
It has to be Kimi Räikkönen. He has such experience. I had high hopes for him today, and to be the only DNF, I was disappointed. Sad.
It was weird because it just came out of nowhere. A lot of accidents generally at the beginning of the race, there's something going on, and it kind of almost just happened. That is unfortunate.
Something similar happened with Vettel and Verstappen 2 seasons ago. When you get behind another car, you lose downforce. Vettel's situation, though, was in a braking zone. Raikkonen's was weird because he must not have expected to get that much slipstream off of Giovinazzi's car. Having to deal with that downforce loss really impacted him, and he hit the back tire, lost the wing. My zero would be that one lap wonder. It just goes to show, just because you can build a car to go really fast for one lap does not mean it's going to be fast for the rest of the race. And this is why I do not recommend people have Russell on their fantasy Formula One team. You lose so many points losing places. It's a big oof, because Russell, he keeps qualifying high, and you think, oh, you start in 11th? You just have to pass one guy, get points for your team. Hopefully that car will continue to develop, or maybe next season when they get a whole new car. Now that we've done our race reactions, it's time for the results of our one race challenge. Bro made an amazing discovery. One race challenge. An acronym is ORC. Anytime we refer to ORC, you are going to know what we're talking about. Kicking it over to the Portugal Grand Prix. 21 teams in the league. Thank you to everybody who joined in. We had 11 for the previous race, so we are so thankful that you guys are joining in and having fun. We do want to make some clarifications for you. In the future, in the case that a team uses a mega driver, we will not take the mega points into consideration. So whatever they get, we'll divide that by 3 so that it is even playing field. Let's look at our race winner for the Portugal Grand Prix, Johannes. You had Verstappen, turboed Leclerc, you had Norris, Ocon, Schumacher, and Red Bull. Very solid lineup, 192 points. Dad, you came very close. You tied, actually, for second place, just 3 points behind. Man, earlier you were just talking over and over how you could have got those 3 points. How do you feel? You came in really close with those 3 points.
I thought it was interesting how two teams had the same amount of points with different constructors. I was tempted before the race to trade Gasly, Ocon, and I wish I had, because that would have actually put me on the podium in first place. But if you look at it with the person who actually won first, he had Ocon and I didn't. I could have tied for first place, I guess, actually. And then we could have heard 2 different national anthems.
If you join our league and you are the top 3 finishers, you will get a special podium ceremony at the end of this podcast. And for the winner, you will be able to hear your national anthem during that podium ceremony. That means at the end of this video, we're going to hear the beautiful Danish national anthem. For our next race, which will be in Spain, there's 3 of us already in. If we get a minimum of 10 teams, we're able to have a custom icon and backdrop. Seeing the link in the description below, you can see the link on our Twitter as well. There's only 1 week between now and the next race, and so we want to be able to get this league customized as soon as possible. The link code is right here. But like I said, I'll put in the description below. Thank you to everyone who's been participating in our ORCs, ORC standing for One Race Challenge. And I would like to present to you our new segment called ORC Elite. My bro had a really great idea. He says, ORC, why not it be a real orc that's in a racing helmet? He did the design, I made the logo, and here we have it, our new segment, ORC, One Race Challenge. What we are presenting now is the ORC Elite. I have an algorithm. A computer does all the calculations in our Google Sheet to present the best potential team that meets 2 criteria. The first is no Mega Driver. It's a special item that you can use. So this is without a Mega Driver. And then second, being $100 million or less. It's a part of the initial cap. Teams get more valuable. And it's amazing to me that you can have a more valuable team but not get the highest score. For example, the ORC Elite for this race had Verstappen, turboing Norris, Bottas, Ocon, Schumacher, and McLaren. And notice that would be 198 points, which outscored our podium finishers for our ORC race. And it still costs under 100 million with 0.4 million to spare. What is your reactions, guys, to seeing the ORC Elite for this last race?
I think it's pretty cool how it looks. It would be kind of nice if I could have predicted that team, and I would have had to use a wild card to be able to do that.
This is something that I developed right before this last race. And actually, if you look on the Google Sheet, I'll kick it over so you can see what this is referring to. Underneath the score section, you have T5. This is the percentage of that driver being the top 5 scorers. But just because you're a top 5 scorer doesn't mean that you're affordable as a part of a team. So a new section called TT%, that is your percentage of being in the top team, or what we're calling the ORC Elite. So as you can see here, Bottas has a 67% that he was in the top 5 and 67% that he was in the ORC Elite. Hamilton 100% in the top 5, but 0% in the ORC Elite, and that's because of his cost. Norris 100% in both top 5 and ORC Elite. Here are the ones in blue, the ones that are above 50%. Bottas, Norris, Schumacher, and Verstappen. That is the thing that surprised me the most, is that Bottas is a sleeper. I knew about Schumacher because of his points per million is one of the highest, but Bottas, he's apparently just cheap enough and gives just enough points that it balances with Verstappen. What are your guys' thoughts about Bottas?
A little bit of a surprise, really. I've just never really thought of Bottas as a driver to pick up. It just seems like he cost a lot and Hamilton would score more. But if it works, then that's just something new to consider. I think that's just crazy.
Well, you bring up a good point, because on the Google spreadsheet, I do have it listed where the gap between teammates as it pertains to cost. And the largest gap in price is actually between the Mercedes drivers. It's 10 million. Bottas may not be getting as many points as Hamilton, but that is 10 million more, which allows you to get Norris. Bro, didn't you have Mercedes as your constructor this last race? You got 70 points, but I noticed that you could not afford a turbo driver, or at least a strong turbo driver on your team.
Right.
So who are you thinking you're going to pick up this coming race?
There's quite a few drivers that seem like they're starting to look better and better every race. The most obvious one definitely is Norris. And he's cheaper too, which is kind of crazy. He's been driving really well, and he's getting more fantasy points than some of the people that are more expensive. And so that just seems like that's a lock-on pick. I wouldn't even say I'd probably have to do too much backbending to get that to work. That's the crazy thing. So definitely going to be one of the guys I'm going to want to get on my team.
But on that ORC Elite, had McLaren not scored the extra 10 points for their streak, they still wouldn't have beat even with Bottas on the team.
Well, that's a good point. Here's something that we have to keep in mind is the ORC Elite has the advantage of picking the best team after the race. All the rest of us have to pick our team before the race. Here is some crazy stats for the ORC Elite compared to the top team in the world for each race. And like I said, you're removing the Mega Driver component of it. But the number one team in race 1, the ORC Elite beat it by 4 points. In race 2, the ORC Elite lost to the world leader by 4 points, but beat this week's top team by 3 points. So that is a net of 3 points over the world leaders to start noticing the trends of what is a good composite team. Some of these teams are going to get more expensive, more than 100 million. So I'm assuming they will eventually beat out the ORC Elite team.
It just goes to show that there is a lot of different things to think about when you do fantasy Formula One. And that's probably one of the things that's so great about it is, yes, I can have a team that's worth a lot, but on any given week, team with people that cost less could be better.
And that's the end of our new segment, the ORC Elite. Maybe we'll put this picture in our tweets and stuff. Join our ORC, our One Race Challenge, #ORC. We're going to now go over to League DRD. The battle race, the third of the pre-seasonal races that we had. It came to one win for each of us. Bro, how do you feel about finally getting your first head-to-head slot battle race victory?
After last week, getting the second amount of points and not scoring anything, it finally feels good. I have been in 9 separate categories and have now won 1, which puts me at an abysmal percentage rate. But 1 is better than 0. Late is better than never.
Congrats to you, Dad, because you and I both ended the season on equal battle race victories, which means that the tiebreaker comes down to total points, and you edged me out with 187 to 185. So we both had 4 battle race victories, but you outscored me by 2 points. Congrats. Let's kick it over to our Google Sheet so we can go into our League DRD. We have finished the preseason, which consisted of battle races, and now we're going to go in the regular season consisting of 13 races that have sub-races, King and Court race. And we'll explain those as we get to our team picks. Going over to our draft page. After 3 races, the averages are out, and any driver that is averaging over 21 is going to be considered a wild card. We're going to look to see who's averaging over 21 points. We have Leclerc and we have Norris. And so that now means that those 2 guys that we were leaning so heavily on in those battle races are now off the table. How do you feel about that, Dad? Leclerc and Norris gone.
Oh, I kind of had a liking for them, and it's going to be sad not to be able to pick them. And it might play a strategy on if I pick first or second based on what it looks like now.
That is true, because being the winner of the battle race, you get to choose your draft position. Now, this is how the rules declare. You're going to draft 4 drivers. Each week, you get to keep one of your 4 drivers, and then the other 3 will be redrafted.
Question is, do I want to go first or second?
Oh, you don't want to go third.
I want to go third.
You can go third. No, hold on. Let me give you some advice, okay? This is what my advice to you. You say, hey, I will go third, and Dominick must go first. He has declared it.
That's not how that goes.
I know.
He gets to pick his draft position, and then I get to pick my draft position, and then you get to pick.
He's the king. If he declares that I have to go first, then who am I to disagree?
He's not the king.
Oh, yeah. Well,
no.
Oh, you're right. There is no king the first race.
There's no king. Yep.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, if Bottas is averaging 20 and he goes above 21, then I lose him.
He is no longer one of the guys you can keep.
I will pick.
Bro, there's 3 options. This is a multiple choice question, and there is no wrong answer.
I will pick second.
Oh, interesting.
That is actually very interesting because I would hate to draft second.
Okay, now, bro, you have a true and false question. Make it rain.
I guess I'll have to draft first.
All right.
Okay, Let's go to the draft manager.
I just want to see Jeanmark's strategy.
It's time to do the drafting. Apparently, I have to draft first. then Dad, then Dominick, and then we snake until we've got 4 drivers apiece.
Oh my, such a burden.
Look, somebody's going to end up with Mazepin. Somebody's going to end up with negative points. Oof. Wow, taking Norris and Leclerc off the board is horrible.
Yeah, because they're even lower, so that would have given you more options.
Because if you want to pick a really good driver, you're going to have Garbo.
Hey, here's the nice thing. If you guys take the best drivers, I don't have this problem.
Okay,
Dad,
I'm going to pick Perez.
Yeah, the strategy I was going to play.
Exactly. So you should have drafted first.
Okay, well, I'll play the short game. You played the long game. I'll play the short game, and I'll take Bottas.
Watch both of our drivers be wild carded the next race.
I'm afraid he's only going to last one more race.
Right, which means that if you put him in the King's race and you win the King's race, good for you, but then you're probably going to have terrible defending him.
Radio, mates. So I get the advantage of being able to pick a good driver and then Schumacher.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, boy.
Oh, no.
Yes. Because look, it's nice. Because check it out. Like, I get a good driver. Then Schumacher actually frees up a lot more for my third driver.
That's true.
Bottas and Perez, those are slam dunk choices. I'm already in the part where I'm like, I'm not sure. I think Ocon's cool. I'm going to give him a shot. And then obviously I'm going to follow that up with Schumacher.
Oh, no.
Dude,
That's
people are
right.
going to crash.
But I'll take Raikkonen.
Now,
have-
Mazepin.
So you're going
Here's the
Mazepin.
problem is Latifi finally finished a race this season. So if I don't think Latifi's going to crash out, he'll get me measly points.
Latifi finally finished a race this season and somehow scored less points in fantasy than the guy who was a minute behind his teammate.
Right, exactly.
Think about that for a second.
Exactly.
Okay?
Give me some
So you're going
Mazepin.
with Matt-
Give me
Okay,
some
you're going-
Mazepin.
All right,
Give
we go
me
with
some
Mazepin.
Mazepin.
All
Give
right,
me
that's
some
cool.
Mazepin. Never thought I would
You-
say that.
When I say it that way, it makes more sense. Okay, so who's your third?
Okay, so Mazepin is now going to give me
Yeah,
Ricardo.
that's an option.
Okay, very good.
What's the
No.
exhalation for?
No.
Because I want Ricardo.
Well, maybe you should have drafted first. It seems like I'm taking all the guys you want, and then Dominick's taking all the guys you want. Come
This
on.
guy's big brain move was to let us steal all his drivers. Real good planning on your part. I salute you.
Okay.
Dude, his brain must be like hurting from all of the sheer power that's flowing through it.
I will assume that Sainz had trouble this time just because of his tire management, and I will take Sainz.
Okay.
No.
Hey, don't complain.
Yes, complaining. I am complaining. I am going to complain that oh man. But hey, at least I got to pick twice, right? So obviously I'm going with Alonso. Stroll and then Alonso.
So you have all 4 of your players now.
Yep.
My last pick was Sainz.
Chant with me. Latifi. 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 Latifi.
Latifi. I'll tell you what. Let me
Oh,
just.
did I hear him just say Latifi?
Yes, I heard it.
I think he
That
just drafted Latifi.
That is canon. He has chosen Latifi. He has no other options. I'm sorry. Here we go.
Yes, I'll take Gasly.
What's that
All right.
exhalation for? Do you not like Gasly?
No, I just wish Sonoda was doing better, and I pick him up. So it's
Then that
gonna be
means I will
interesting.
pick up Giovinazzi.
No, Latifi.
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 Latifi. And he said it. He said it 3 times. You know what that means?
But before I said all that, I said Gio. This is where we're going to have what's called a King's and a Court race. To break this down simply, you have 4 drivers. You're going to pair them up. And then King's race, whoever wins that will get a championship point. Whoever wins the Court race will get a championship point. But if you win the King's race, you're the defending king for the next race, which means that if you win the King's race as consecutive, you'll win 2 points instead of 1. Now, if you do not get a point or you lose a race, you'll get a credit. And you can spend those credits to buy turbos, to buy megas, to buy wild cards. So as the season progresses, it gives parity a way to catch up, because that's one of the biggest problems that I have with regular fantasy Formula One is how do you ever catch up once you're behind?
And a wild card is different in our thing. It's not you can just get new drivers. It's that you can take a driver that's part of the yellow list that are a little too high that we can't draft them normally and then add them to our team. So that's what a wild
Exactly. So you pretty much get a third driver on your team. Mega driver's the same. It's multiplied by 3, and then a turbo's doubled.
Okay, so King's race for me is Alonso and
Put mine in then. I've got Perez
Fine.
and Ricardo. And then
Yeah.
court race would be Mazepin and Giovinazzi.
but next week we'll do it correctly.
And then he's putting Bottas and Gasly.
Shocker.
Oh, he didn't put in signs. Interesting.
I don't trust Sainz after he only scored 2 points this week. I know Raikkonen might be able to win it by himself, but I could have put Raikkonen with Bottas.
Did he just say Raikkonen can win it by himself? He thinks that Raikkonen's gonna
He thinks that
mop
Raikkonen
the
can
floor
steamroll
against Schumacher, Stroll, Mazepin, and Giovinazzi.
Okay, maybe Mazepin. But you think Raikkonen could beat Schumacher and Stroll by himself? He couldn't even finish a race by himself. What are you saying? Oh, man.
I think I meant Bottas, but I could have accidentally.
Wow, the power of hindsight's real good, ain't it?
And there you have it. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this great experience, being a part of the Pitwall Pit Crew. And I've been your host, J-Jack. And thank you, bro, for joining me. And Dad as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. Being a part of the Google Sheets viewing community. Always, any suggestions for how to improve it are welcome. And until next time, we'll see you on the pit wall.